It was either the Lion King soundtrack or the soundtrack to Pokemon the movie 2000, way back in the day. What about you, Johnny?
I did notice my sister did have the TLC album in the early days. I was very jealous. Yeah, the first album I purchased, I don't know if I purchased it.
It was a good one. Yeah, it was a good one.
Might have been like, yeah, some early Petty Theft days. I think it was the Blink-182 album when I was like in middle school or something. I'll pass it to Taisha. The question is the first album you've ever purchased.
So my answer is actually a record, and it's and it's Purple Rain, Prince. Got it for my birthday. I didn't purchase it, but it's my first music that I begged for, and I got it. And yeah, it is still one of my favorite albums to this day. And I will pass it to. Did everybody go? I'm sorry. I was trying to make sure everything was where I was supposed to.
You can give it to Sharon.
Sharon, I'm giving it back to you, sis.
Okay, I'll close it out. Similarly to our pre-discussion, by the time that I could remember first having music of my own, I was just excited to have an iPod Classic. So I was listening to a lot of the music my brothers were listening to, which was like Linkin Park, Blink-182, Muse, things like that. Very angsty teenage boy music. But now that we're all here, I think we can go ahead and get started. First, of course, I would like to thank all of you panelists for being here today. I would like to thank Siobhan's team and Siobhan herself, of course, for their vision and hard work and holding this space for us all together despite the pandemic giving us this time. So today in this panel, we're going to be discussing policy, research, and practice, realizing equity in the outdoors, and how advocates of color are using their voices and their platforms to advocate for our communities. With that being said, I'm going to allow each of the panelists here to introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask each of you to say your name, pronouns, where you're joining us from, and please provide a land acknowledgement, and which organizations you're representing, as well as any other affiliations you would like to call out while you're here. So with that in mind, I don't actually mind being the first example. My name is Sharon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm joining from Northwest DC, which is historically Anacostan and Piscataway land. I'm here representing the Wilderness Society, and I'm happy to be here. So I'll give it to Anha after this.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sharon, and thank you to your team and to everybody for this space to just have some fun and have a great conversation. My name is Angel Peña. I am first father of three little rascals who love to run around outdoors. I am then the partner of a frontline educator. I am one of the founding members of the Next 100 Coalition, as well as many of my colegas here on this call, one of the founding members of the Outdoor Future Initiative, a policy advocate for Green Latinos, and then the executive director of the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project, where the team and I truly wake up every day to ensure that deliberately historically excluded communities not only have access to the outdoors, but have access to the public land management process. And I'm calling in here today, right now, first from my kitchen that is located on the stolen lands and broken treaties of the Jornada Mogollon, otherwise down here at the southern border of Las Cruces in southern New Mexico. Thank you again to our partners and to my colegas for taking on these amazing questions in this concert and this conversation we're about to take on. And so with that, I will pass it on to Ms. Taisha, because you're next on my little block.
Awesome.
If that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Taisha, she, her pronouns, zooming in from Boulder, Colorado, land of the Ute, Arapaho, Shoshone, and Cheyenne. Also want to give some love and appreciation and honor to my own ancestral lands, wherever they may be, and really honor all of the lands as, again, the stolen and the stolen from. I am I have many service levers, one of which in my role here today as policy director for Outdoor Afro. And I will tell you more about that when we do the intros. Is that now or later? Outdoor Afro, the Cliff Notes is where Black people meet and lead in the outdoors. And I also serve as a volunteer lead for the Colorado Network. I am also in service to the state of Colorado as a commissioner for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Although in this conversation, I will not be speaking. I am not their spokesperson, but I certainly have some reflections. So that will be integrated into my reflections today. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be speaking with you. And I will pass the mic to Chris.
Thanks, Taisha. I'm Chris Liu. I use he, him pronouns. Calling in today from Seattle, the traditional lands of the Duwamish and Suquamish peoples and other Coast Salish nations. I think, what was the other part of the question? Which groups I'm representing? So today I have my Outdoor Asian hat on, and also am representing the National Parks Conservation Association, just as a member of their Next Generation Advisory Council. And I'll pass it to Jason.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all of you for being here. Thank you to the sponsors, and just excited to have this conversation. My name is Jason Swan. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am calling from Thompson, Georgia, rural Thompson, Georgia, and the ancestral lands of Muskogee. I just actually found that out today, which is great. Now, I'm originally from Georgia, but Colorado is one of my first true loves, as I always like to say. And I work as a land policy analyst with Western Resource Advocates. My expertise is focusing on analysis on equitable access to public open spaces, access to decision-making, and managing and limiting access in a fair manner for natural resource protection. As Taisha had mentioned, I'm not a spokesperson for WRA today. I'm actually working in the capacity of the co-founder of Rising Routes. As an organization, we are dedicated to working with a diverse set of communities through the nexus of mental wellness, social justice, and environmental stewardship for a better quality of life for all people. And finally, I also serve, which I'm very proud of, as a Outdoor Afro Colorado alumni and a former co-lead for the Colorado Network. I'm hoping to continue to be in the future, to be a leader with them again, and continue to serve as Outdoor Afro's policy on their Outdoor Afro's policy leadership team. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you all. So to kick off our session, I want to ask you all, what drives your work on a personal level, and why are you passionate about equity in the outdoor environment? Whoever would like to go first, feel free to hop in.
Well, I guess whoever's mute is off has to go first. That's how we do it in our meetings at Rising Routes. But it's funny, because it's crazy when I always have to use, I guess I always feel a certain way about talking, I used to anyway, feel a certain way about talking about my story, because but in prior, it was really filled with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt would come over me when someone asked me, well, what's your story? How did you get into this? But I will say this to everyone's listening, once I stepped confidently into my own agency, I started to move a lot differently. So I would encourage everyone to tell your story, because your story is unique to who you are. You should always feel confident about that. So, so a little bit about, there was an incident that happened that took place in Nebraska, where cops wrongfully accused me of a crime I didn't commit. I was beat, also thrown in jail, and I had to fight the judicial system for over a year. That experience woke me up to the disparities of our judicial system. It woke me up to the disparities of racial injustice. And once I moved to Colorado, I really did find respite in the healing powers of the outdoors. And I've always say, as I mentioned before, that Colorado is truly a first love for me, because having access to the outdoors really calmed that rage, really calmed that shame and guilt that I was speaking of. and from all those incidents. And because of the outdoors, was so beneficial to my mental health, because it was so beneficial to healing me, I wanted to share that with everybody I could, right? So the spark of Rising Routes was lit. We started off as a small hiking group to get different life experiences, different culture, different backgrounds, just together, just sharing their stories so that we can be able to build more empathy and more action for other people's causes instead of our own. And now we're an organization, as I mentioned in the introductions, that is continually working on with diverse communities through the nexus of mental health, social justice, and environmental stewardship. And I'm very passionate about equity in the outdoors, especially just with those experiences in my own life. So I hope that we can continue to do what we always haven't done, which is, I hope we listen to each other more. I hope we build more meaningful relationships with each other. I hope we lean into empathy. I hope we hold ourselves and others accountable. And more importantly, I really hope that we take action where we see the faintness of inequalities. And as I always like to mention, and I'll end it here, one of my mentors is Taisha Adams. She's on this call today, and I'm so thankful for her and all the work that she continues to do. And she sets the bar and the example that I aspire to become. So, we have these conversations all the time about outdoor equity. It's about so much more than reducing financial barriers to provide experiences in the outdoors, right? And for me, it's education. The education is the catalyst in which personal systemic transformation creates more equitable outcomes for all. It encourages people to have more agency. It develops more durable skills. And I think more importantly, it really creates a deeper and more collective understanding of each other. And
who wants to follow that?
I just want to add on to that. Well, one, I want to say some love. You inspire me, Jason Swan. So I just feel this reciprocal love. And again, just so much, I'm on this call because of the other people on this call. I'm on this call because of the people who are watching this, because I don't get audience with the people watching this, right? I don't get to time. Well, actually, I've actually changed my whole life, and we'll get into career pathways later, so that I actually do get to be in conversations like this, in meeting rooms like this, more and more and more. And that's intentional, and it's hard to do, but it is possible. So, but you said something that I wanted to add and connect with, and that is, it is the healing component, but to me, it is the it's the interdependentness. When we are nature. So when we are in places that are human-made, right, that don't allow the frequencies of air and our water and our energy to flow, it disrupts our brain. It interrupts our physical abilities. Obviously, we know about the toxins in our air, the toxins in our water. That's going to impact our ability to thrive. And so when we are in these more pure, natural spaces where we don't have the line, como se dice, the lines in the thing that are very, I love 5G too. However, that would require an entire new infrastructure, PS. And so, when we are in these places that don't have this human-made interruptions, we're able to more deeply connect, right? And so that's where the outdoor access comes into play, but that access will not come in isolation, and we'll talk about that later. But I just wanted to add on about that. And again, the evidence base is clear on the impacts of health. We're actually prescribing health interventions. We'll also talk about that later. So a little bit of heads up. Other comments?
On health, maybe?
All day long. And honestly, I have so many notes. I don't even know. I will need to be reminded what the initial question was, because I have some championing notes behind Jason, and then just some supportive comments around Taisha. I miss Taisha, and just how it's rooted in kind of the next generation. But again, I don't even remember where the question
the original question
started,
was,
but if Chris had yeah.
The original question was, what drives your work on a personal level, and why are you passionate about equity in the outdoors and the environment?
Yes, and so since I have the microphone on, yes, as a parent, I'm a parent of three. I have a 13-year-old. I have a 4-year-old. I have a young little bud, this little boy, my only son, who's turning 3 today. And so if you hear him in the background, it's because he's just having a good time with his sisters and his mom. And all to tell you that because that's what really drives me, right? I am a first generation Mexican American. I was not taken outdoors on the weekends because my family as labor workers who did that all day, all week, that's kind of the last thing they wanted to do. It wasn't till I became a parent at a young age, at 19, that I realized that, hey, we're going to eat lunch. I can pack that lunch up. I can put it in a backpack and we can go to the park. That then progressed to going to trails. Then that progressed to camping. And now my daughter is really the reason why we own horses. She's the reason why we have hunting tags. And she has me like, we know what sections we want to really dive into this year. We know all the great fishing holes, and that's because of my daughter. And so when you ask me what drives me personally, what drives the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project, that is really the next generation of folks. I often say this, I think my colleagues have heard me say this, that I personally know that I am not smart enough nor cool enough to take on the generations of inequity, of racism and inequality, but that the best thing that we can do is set up a strong ass foundation so our kiddos can take that flag, and pay the appropriate attention to those big questions, because I don't think they should be solved in any one congressional landscape, but that is absolutely what drives me, is to build that foundation. And so I will stop talking there for a minute. And I will also say it is nothing but a privilege to be here with my colleagues in this space and taking on this these questions. So appreciate you all.
And Chris, maybe we can hear from you.
Yeah, I guess that leaves me. I want to say that what everyone said so far definitely resonates with me. Jason, when you talk about the healing nature of being in the outdoors, though I have, because of my privilege and how I present and identify, haven't had as traumatic an experience, and I still find that nature is a place I go to for solace and for healing. And Taisha, I agree with you that in these spaces, it's definitely much more conducive to having those spiritual moments, moments where you connect with the true being of who you are and where we come from. The reason I'm in this work is like unheld because when I grew up, I didn't really have opportunities to go out. As coming from a family of first generation immigrants, they didn't really see that as an opportunity. We didn't really know about it. So, Jason, like you said, education is definitely a huge part of all this. And, now having been in the space and having been able to explore the wonders of the outdoors through a lot of great people that I've met in my life, and had the privilege of meeting a lot of great teachers and mentors. I want to make sure that people of all creeds and color and how other people identify, people from the disability community and QT, BIPOC folks are able to enjoy these places as I have. And, that's just one component, right? The access. And, my goal, ideally, the ideal future for me would be a world where like outdoor Asian didn't need to exist, right? So that's what drives me is, that hope for a better future for next generations.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to follow up. I realized what the actual question was and I didn't answer it. Well, I did kind of, but I will say, at Outdoor Afro, we really think about the diversity within the diversity and recognize that we're not a monolith, which is to say, I grew up with access to green space, undisturbed for the majority of my day and time, because my mother was a single mother and I got opportunities to be outside with my extended family and my friends all summer long, all day. There was no class. There was no come to this special fishing thing. No, we used cheese. We climbed on the thing. I'm more comfortable barefoot now. Actually, my friend, I was just in DC and I was walking outside with my friend and she said, "Where your shoes at?" I said, "I just wanted to be out without no shoes on." She was like, "Girl." And I was like, "Look, I can do all the things. I can wear the heels, but I'm more comfortable." But what I lacked was the cultural connection, right? And so that, again, it wasn't until Outdoor Afro where I had gotten access to that erased and lost history and current contributions of Black people in nature for outdoor recreation, for stewardship, for conservation, for all of the things in all of the ways. So for me, it's more of an opportunity of the belonging aspect, is being able to see that I'm a part of this, that I've always been hiding in plain sight all along, I often say. And so I hope that Outdoor Afro exists forever, because I want people to be able to have that opportunity to really dive deeply within our own cultural heritage, but also be able to explore others. Like, I love going to Latino Outdoors Colorado, or in the West of Tierra, or Rising Routes, or Queer Nature, or Outdoor Asian. I learned something. And again, we've been miseducated, my friends, all of us. And so those are the times where I can not only reconnect to nature and reconnect to community, but I can also reconnect to those lost traditions. Again, when a half-truth is a lie. So really these spaces are not just go play, right? There are these things that are dynamic and that are happening, right? And that's why we all want them. We went to the pandemic and we were like, wait, these places are out here? Now, granted, I knew they were out here. And that's why I'm working so hard, right? But at the same time, I just have to honor all of the places that we've been in, the spectrum. And if anything, I'm just trying to create the conditions where everyone can be their fullest and most authentic selves. Thank you.
Miss Taisha, if I could, Jason.
No, I just said, go ahead.
Scissors. Who goes next? Who goes next? Paper, rock, scissors. No. Just to add on real quick, and then over to you, sir, Mr. Swan. Yes, I just want to call out that I feel like they have been deliberately, historically excluded stories. I don't know that it's all on us to take on like, oh, well, we were forgotten. Oh, because we didn't do our part. Oh, no, I don't know. I feel like we did our part, right? There was like a deliberate exclusion of that. And so all to say, yes, Ms. Taisha, and then Jason, sir, sorry. I
didn't have anything to say.
Sir.
It was more of a here, and just attest to all of that.
Wow. No, thank you all for those great responses. To dig a little bit into the meat of the work that each of you do, perhaps actually, Jason, I would love to ask you first, maybe what are some policy issues related to equity in the outdoors that you've engaged with, and how are these policies creating positive impacts on the community level?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. So there's
in addition to leading by example, or they're like, no, thank you, Jason. Yes.
No, you're right. You do need to lead by examples, as Taisha and everybody always says. Where are your receipts? What are you doing out here? What are you? How are you contributing, and how is it perpetual and ongoing and freely of your time? And so that's very important to me. And it was something that I always felt that was inherent in what I want to do. It wasn't about trying to chase clout or become or get into a space where, I am today. What I've learned is that when you start doing the work and you continue to do the work without looking for clout or anything, what happens is the people typically choose you. And and put you on the pedestal so you can continue to be that voice. Sometimes it's just not your choice. And I can imagine for a lot of heroes that we exemplify and really respect today, some of them might have didn't want to be in their position, but the people put them in there. So, but I do want to talk about a specific statistic of policy initiatives that I've had the pleasure to work on here in Colorado. And I want to start with what the report from the Center for American Progress and the Hispanic Access Foundation created. They did some research and came out with a report back in 2020 that showed that more than 76% of people who live in low-income communities of color live in nature-deprived places. And so, that alone was something that, propelled me to work with Next 100 Coalition and Representative Leslie Harold and a whole suite of people to be able to create the Outdoor Equity Grant Program, which passed in June of this year. And it was inspired by people on this call, Nuestra Tierra and some of the work they did down in New Mexico to create the New Mexico Outdoor Equity Grant Fund. So appreciate you. It's always a pleasure to be able to follow, the people who've come before you. But also there was an initiative in California with the California Equity Grants Program in 2019 as well. And then there's the national focus, which me and some of our colleagues here today are a part of and founding members of the Outdoor Future Initiative. So I've had a lot of great examples to actually do this work way before me, right? And to be able to mimic something similar to that. But we had to really delve a little deeper into the communities and some of the disparities that currently exist in Colorado, right? We're unique. We're not New Mexico, we're not California. And so, we're really hoping primarily to serve and focus on the inclusivity, the economic, demographic, and access disparities associated with the most marginalized. And what we found with the Outdoor Equity Grant Program in Colorado is it can alleviate some of those extra steps and costs that are required to receiving funding, from these grant dollars. And some of those funding, or at least what I would say, is some of those dollars that actually go to entities have to go or get passed through, from local governments to land trusts. But we found a way to, avoid all those steps by granting those dollars directly to an independent board. And that board is made up of people who have experience in justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and providing environmental and recreational education programs in the outdoors. And so, that was a huge step for us to create a board that looked and represented us and represented the communities in which we are already serving. And we were able to do that in Colorado. Also, we wanted to make sure that these funds were perpetual, long-term, and sustainable. And we were able to do that with funding from lottery dollars, which is going to provide $3 million annually, perpetually. And we also received this year $1 million from the federal stimulus dollars that came in, so to kind of kickstart the program. So it's an amazing opportunity. We're working with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who will be implementing this program. But also I want to talk about, it's not going to require any matching funds, right? A lot of times when you want to apply for funds, and organizations that are small businesses, they want you to match the funds. And that's something that's just not, feasible for a lot of organizations. And so we wanted to alleviate that as well. And another thing, a barrier we saw in Colorado is restricted funds, right? You receive these funds, but then you're restricted to how you can use them. So we wanted to make sure that that barrier was removed and we can have more unrestricted resources for things like transportation, gear, permits, and even staff supervision. So I guess I say all that to say is that, this lacking of financial and economic resources that have historically and continue to exclude underserved youth and their families from experiencing the outdoors, our water, our wildlife, our land. It won't be solved through this bill. We have to understand that this is not going to solve our equity problems. And I just want to make that very clear. But what it will do is provide a down payment. And so
Right.
I'm hoping that it can bolster that.
And, again, I think that also, leads to how we're defining equity. And I urge us all to really think deeply. Don't just let this word come and go and think that we're all speaking the same. We're not. And it's really critical. And again, and that's okay. But don't assume that we are. Always ask. Just ask. Like, hey, how do you define that term? How does your organization define that term? How does your organization or you hold yourself accountable to this term, right? And so at Outdoor Alpha, we unpack this term by four levers, each of which have an evidence base, because equity, as we are talking about it right now, has been studied deeply for at least 20 years, y'all. So just please. I know sometimes people feel new, and that's great for them, but it's not. And it's gaslighting when people say, it's new. No, it's not, right? And so come on now, we got to do our work, and that's why it's here. Again, those four lenses that we use are access, important, but access and quality, right? So I always push back when somebody says, well, do you have a park 10 minutes? And I'm like, well, I used to, and I never stepped foot in it because it was dirt. And
Right.
So access without quality is not what I want. Similarly with representation, who gets to decide where the park is, how big it is, who gets to work there, when, how, right? All of that, all of those things can be inspiring places to work and steward our lands, wildlife, and waterways. And then lastly, meaningful participation. I love a focus group. I love an advisory council, right? But I also love staff and leadership. I also love volunteerism. There's so many pathways to meaningfully engage. And so when I'm looking, I'm disaggregating those engagement opportunities by by the different diversity and representation lenses. All of those lenses that I reference are measurable. And so again, I challenge us to think about that when we are using this term. And I appreciated what Jason said around the policy pieces, because again, that piece around reducing the bureaucratic burden. It is easier. I heard an incredible statistic today, a couple of days ago, which said something to the effect of environmental conservation organizations that are led by white or that are white led receive, let's say on average, somewhere of $3 million. And BIPOC led or Black, Indigenous, people of color, although I racially and ethnically diverse, $300,000, right? So that's a 2.7 billion with a B. And that's just on environmental conservation. Imagine what that would look like for outdoor recreation. I would imagine it's similar, right? So again, access is me receiving something. It's no change in the power dynamic, right? And so when I say we've been hiding in plain sight, I mean, we have been fighting to have a seat at the table. We have been working even when we didn't. And many of us were there at the table. So again, I just wanted to make sure that we had a conversation of how, some of us use this term, and again, the encouragement to make sure that you have a definition that again connects to the evidence base and then extends to your context, which is also really important. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. I actually wanted to also extend that same question to you, Chris, coming from a different perspective and kind of speaking from the background working with Outdoor Asian. How do you define equity in the outdoors for yourself and for your organization, and what sort of strategies would you like the conservation and outdoor recreation community to advance to allow your communities to also enjoy parks and nature?
Yeah, well, I'll build off of what Taisha and Jason talked about in terms of, representation in a lot of these positions that have more power and say in where funding goes and how policy is built. So, I think one thing that's important to me is that we have more BIPOC folks on advisory boards and on like ranking committees, on interview panels for positions that have, both a large like external facing role and, just to be able to move, shift some of that influence from what we've traditionally had, which isn't working, to a model where there's more power given to the community to decide what is good for them. And I think a lot of times we're stuck in at least for me, when I volunteer with nonprofit organizations, there's you're working within that model of the nonprofit industrial complex. And, like Jason said, smaller organizations don't have the capacity sometimes to do that, like to hire someone solely dedicated to development work. So, for me, an equitable environment would be one where that disparity is no longer there. I know that it's going to take a lot more than just a single policy, like Jason said, to fix a lot of these issues, because they're so systemic. But we just need to have the ability to imagine what that would look like, and it's hard because we work within the current system. So for me, it's just a matter of working with folks on this panel to figure out what that would look like and how to get there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Kind of building off both of those answers and touching back on policy, if we could have a lightning round, if possible, version from all of you, if there were any specific policy or potential fund that you could create to increase equity in nature and the outdoors, what would it do, or what would it fund? Whoever wants to go first, please feel free. And if you want to take a minute to think, also take a moment.
I know I have to get it. I'm like, for me, look, I got to start here because I'm like, it wouldn't even go into increasing access in the outdoors. It wouldn't go even to that. It would go into providing the basic necessities that families need, whether it's food, water, shelter. Like those are the basic, because that when you have that, you create more capacity for people to imagine. And when you create more capacity for people to imagine and they live in a thriving life, they're going to do that automatically. It's just going to inherently provide them with more time and affordability to go out and experience the great outdoors. So mine would be ensuring that people have a livable wage, because that is not the case right now. And ensuring that, livable wage is really what it comes down to for me. It is expensive to live out here in Colorado. So I'm going to tell you that. So I'm done.
Wow, Jason. Go ahead, Angel.
Ms. Taisha, I apologize.
And please speak to, I hope that we do have time. Again, this is very important and I love this right now. Can we also just speak to the outdoor futures? I would be remiss because, again, when we are talking about equity, one of the most exciting things about this National Outdoor Equity initiative that we've been working on is the equitable process by which it is. When Madam Secretary Deb Haaland says, like she's my homie, I can't help it because I love her, because she sees values and can pronounce my name correctly on the first shots. So anywho, but when they talk about locally led, locally driven, this is what this means. Locally led, locally driven is not funders or anybody else telling me, hey, come to this table and let's talk about X. That is not locally led, locally driven. Locally led, locally driven is like, hey, y'all, what's going on? Hey, let's get together and do this thing and talk about it and figure it out. A part of that could be research where we need to define the problem. I was actually going to answer with equity audit. So that's my answer. Everybody gets an equity audit. I'm going to start with finance, right? But Angel, can you just speak briefly to how this work in New Mexico has extended, not only at the state levels, because California, they get more demand. So do you in New Mexico than your state can handle. And so that's where this national piece comes into play. So can you speak to that? Thank you.
Ms. Taisha, I appreciate, yes, ma'am. And thank you. And yes, here. Like, Ms. Taisha, an elder in this space for sure. And she has unique perspective that we only want to continue to elevate and amplify. Absolutely. And then I also just want to call us out real quick and say that these are really big questions to answer. Right. These are questions that are the result of hundreds of years of inequality, racism, and inequity. And so as I appreciate the question, I don't know that I can solidly give you an answer. I can tell you that there's an amazing group of folks with lived experiences, with real, true lived experiences of how this rolls out on the ground, that have come together, and they have defined themselves as the Outdoor Future Initiative. And so for us, we just want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And that's kind of winning at this point. And as we're diving into that, I'll tell you, on these conversations, we cry with each other, we laugh with each other, we call each other out. And that's true power. And I think that's some amazing steps forward. And so again, no real answer, but then I also don't want our folks to feel the responsibility to have to answer that question, because the appropriate answer is going to take some time, because it was hundreds of years who put us in this space. And so I will stop there. And yes, thank you.
I wasn't able to think of a specific policy, but I'd love to hear more on Angel about the Outdoor Futures Initiative, if you're down to talk more about that.
Yeah, Angel, if you could speak to the Outdoor Future Initiative, and if you could also speak a bit to how generally communities can organize to identify needs and co-develop these types of federal strategies and policy solutions.
Perfect.
Again, so many huge questions there that
and Outdoor Futures as an example.
Yes.
Right? Outdoor Futures as an example of how grounding, very specific, because that's scary. They have created this policy and climate and environment where people feel like, I can't do policy. I'm like, do you have rules in your home? Then you, my friend, are a policymaker. Welcome. Right? And so it is. So again, please speak to the human day-to-day, regular. There was a time when the Congress was not filled with lawyers. There was a time when it was just regular folk taking some time out of their life for their civic engagement for a little bit, and then they came back to their regular life and did their thing, right? And so it is professionalized in a way that we need to be mindful of as well. We are also not as connected to you. Remember, we used to see them at the library, at the grocery store, at the church, and now I don't see them, right? And so this is where this Outdoor Future is different, right? We know each other, right? We are in relation. We're hiking and fishing and camping and laughing and loving and all of those things. And so now we saw this gap, and now we're like, wait, let's come together and do something. And so I got the call from Angel, and Angel said, Miss Ty,
let's change the world. Let's Miss Taisha, let's change the world. That's what I said. And so that's where we are. Yeah. Well,
talk about it. It's real. I'm so excited.
No, absolutely. Here in the state of New Mexico, where this idea started, the first of its kind, we quickly learned and just want to acknowledge that a vision without resources is little more than a hallucination. Working with our partners closely in California and Colorado, we want to make sure that this is more than just a talking point for someone to get reelected, but that this vision really empowers and hits the rubber meets the road in real ways. And that's when we were committed to pulling folks together from real authentic lived experiences to help build that foundation to where now, not at the national level, we don't only incentivize, but we really prioritize those historically, deliberately excluded communities to engage with those deep-rooted traditions of being on land and being and interacting with land. And so, gosh, holy moly, I will stop there. But thank you, Miss Taisha. You got me all fired up. I don't know.
No, and it's just one of those things. It's I'm tired of hearing this narrative of like we're not there. No, we're there, but we're not there in the ways that we can be there fully, because of, again, the historic barriers, which are very clear, as well as just the other natures and issues that are going on. And so, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to talk about research. And again, I just have to
I wanted to ask you about it next time.
I just can't help it. Because one of the things is everybody's like, well, what does the research say? What does the research say? And honestly, I didn't really think that much about research until I started working at the American Institute for Research. And I was like, oh, is this what happens here? Oh, okay. Well, is this how much it costs to do a real study? I mean, like a real top-rate research institute. They don't even get out of bed for $500,000. Right. I mean, it is real. And so therefore, when I came into this more environmental space, having come from the education space, speaking of pathways, the pathway is the pathway. We are the environment. Everyone has a role, period. Like I might not have a role in nursing. Like that's just not I love nurses, et cetera, et cetera. However, everyone has a role with the environment because we are literally breathing it in and out every day, right? We're drinking it in and out. We're pooping it in and out, right? So again, we are viscerally connected. And so when I got into this environmental space and I started asking about the research base, because I just come from this place where like, that's what you ask. I was told I'm starting to look. And so, for example, I'm on the Commission for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and I'm saying how important it is that we reinstitute an in-person conclusion class for our hunters. And because I know that Black people are, we want eyeballs on people before we let them go out in the woods, right? A history of Black torture and violence in the woods. It's a thing. And so I want to make sure that we create the policy conditions where everybody can feel safe. And I know the research page backs me up, and I was wrong. I got a call from the very lovely Dr. Matt Dumphy, who let me know, actually, the research that I found from the 90s says that Black people didn't mention safety at all. And I'm like, who did that? Who paid for it, right? So I while at the Institute for Research, I came across this document from Beyond Chicago Beyond called "Why Am I Always Being Researched?" Jason, can you put this in the chat box for me? And it just blew my mind because I was like, wait. And there's a section for community members. There's a section for researchers. There's a section for funders around equitable questions, equitable processes as it relates to research. And so Matt, to his credit, said, hey, since it's not here, let's put something together. And I was like, that's great. Do you have Black people on your research team? And he was like, no. And I was like, bet. Let me see. Let's work together. And so we found Dr. Harrison Pickney at Clemson. And I was like, Harrison, you do research on African Americans in the outdoors. Would you like to work with us on this? And he was like, yes. And so now we just heard that we got money to do it. Now, Outdoor Afro, we're not a research institution. We're not a policy shop. But what we are is a place where we can connect meaningfully with nature. And research is one of those ways. So I implore you to read that document and figure and really come into those meetings and those conversations with the right questions to ask, with, you know what I mean? Like, because it costs so much money, and we do ourselves a disservice when we take crumbs when they do research on us. Crumbs. I saw a thing that was crumbs. It's not even crumbs, right? And then all these hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell me that water is wet. Right. Sometimes there's a category of research I like to call water is wet, where we spend millions and millions of dollars telling what I already know. We already know, right? The ways of knowing, that knowledge integration that Deb also talks about in the use of knowledge, ecological, traditional knowledge, and academic knowledge. That's all comes in play. We all have a piece of this puzzle. Thank you. All right. Sorry, I just have to get out my research box.
No. Yes, Miss Taisha. And so, just to add to and then I will stop talking for the rest of the night. It's just, Miss Sharon, when you're taking on these questions, it's just like, man, you're asking for answers. And I don't even know if we're asking the right questions, and
we're just trying to find a place to start.
Dude, right. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we only have 7 minutes left. So there is one last question I want to give to you all. Maybe what is some advice you would give to someone who's new in advocacy and wants to get involved in some of the issues we've talked about today? Because as Taisha, you've pointed out, everyone has a very different pathway as to how they've gotten to this space, and everyone has a very different point of access and level of opportunity and platform that they can speak to, and just the level. For a lot of people, they're not involved with some sort of institutionalized organization. They care deeply about the environment. They care about access for their community, but they don't know where to start. So for somebody who's listening in the audience today and might find themselves in that situation, what advice would you give them? Another time, whoever wants to begin, jump into it.
Chris, I would be remiss if we did not give you more, some more, I'm going to shoot it to you. I have a quick one, so I'll shoot you first.
No, I'm just feeling privileged to be here with you all and be able to take it all in. But yeah, from my perspective, I think that people, again, everyone starts at a different place, and just from where you're at, seeing where you can plug in. For me, it started when I first found that passion for the outdoors, and then wanted to get involved, and reached out to a bunch of different state parks in Texas, and started volunteering. And then you get kind of looped into all these different opportunities. And now, sitting on a couple of different boards, I can kind of see my path. But, at the moment, when I first started, I didn't know exactly, how I wanted to plug in, what issues I was passionate about. But just as you get more and more involved and engaged, whether that's just putting yourself out there and reaching out to, people on this panel, feel free to reach out to me. And I'm sure everyone, I know you guys are a lot more busy than I am probably, but, I'm sure you'd be happy to talk to people. So, and you better believe, like, after this panel, I'm connecting with each one of you one-on-one. So just, I think that's a good place to start for people.
I can be very quick with my analysis. One thing I learned is that life is impermanent, it's ever changing, and nothing's guaranteed. So from my experiences, I would say, and my advice, I guess, would be to do whatever is required within your heart to pursue your dreams, and within your values, I suppose is a better way to say it. One thing I would say is, as I mentioned before in the beginning, where are your receipts? Give back to your community freely and often. And just seek out mentors that have been exactly where you want to go. I think that's really what propelled me to even be in this space today, is seeking out people who already been where you want to go, and really hold tight on to them, and you'll see how life will change.
I couldn't agree with that more. And I would say amongst the living and the dead, right? So I think of people like Shirley Chisholm and Polly Murray. They are one of my strongest mentors. But I'm also learning a ton from Adrienne Marie Brown and others. And when you read their journey, you can see some of the policy and advocacy levers that they use. But I would be remiss if I did not bring up voting rights. If we can't get voting rights together, family, then this whole system fails. And so, to my environmentalist friends who want me to care about wolves or anybody else, please, none of that is going to matter if we do not secure the right to vote and secure the systems, both at the federal, state, and local levels. So, there are those components as well. I will also say, be weary of stakeholder fatigue. So, by volunteering for all of these different things, when organizations have too many of that, I'm thinking, well, don't you have staff? What does your staff do? Right. And so again, it's important to be civically engaged and involved, but also be mindful of your own agency, and don't let that distract from the overall goals of what you want to do. And again, you don't have to center the struggle. That's my favorite thing about Outdoor Afro, and what Rumap, the founder of Outdoor Afro, has taught me. You do not have to center the struggle. That is oppression winning right there. You can center joy. You can center inspiration. My life is so much better now than it was before I joined Outdoor Afro. And it's because the invitation to decenter that struggle and again, when I feel that sense of connection to my ancestry,
Oh no, it looks like we lost Taisha.
Well, since we got on hold, we can hear from him, and she'll probably be.
Let's hear from you on hold.
Well, I'm not exactly sure how to take on that energy. I felt like we were going somewhere right there, and I feel like we went there. And so Ms. Taisha took us there, and I just want to call that out. She's Absolutely. Yes, just to call out on receipts. I know that's a conversation that a couple of us have been having on the back end, and receipts simply means that make sure that there are places where you aren't perhaps the person on the op-ed or signing off on the press release or on the front page, but rather that you're really there truly authentically building and cultivating relationship. And so receipts, absolutely. I just wanted to call that out. And then I also, on the second of my list, is authenticity. I really do think if you have an authentic vision and want to see your community power forward, I think that outweighs any talking points that any green group or grass top organization can provide to you, because that hits something that talking points just can't. And so I wrote that down. And then to answer your question, so those were just some thoughts. And then to answer your question, priority on relationships for me is really what makes change. I feel like, there's a ton of nuances, even in the way you buy gas. Are you going to buy at that gas station or the gas station over there? Like, there's tons of nuances. But as long as there is an authentic vision to ensure that you're pushing your vision forward, I think that's really what truly resonates with folks. And I feel like I'm saying resonate and powerful a little bunch of times. But those were the knots, or those were the thoughts I put down. And then I have a birthday kid screaming in the back. So apologies for all the screaming. But thank you for the question. And I'll stop there.
I
Awesome.
want to thank all of you again. We're reaching our hour mark. So I want to say a big thanks to everyone here on the panel. Once again, a thanks to Siobhan and her team for putting together this conference. I don't know if there's a way that you all can put any contact information to share with the audience if people want to be able to reach you, if they want to get involved with any of the policy that you're working on. But yeah, if there's anything you want to say in terms of how people can reach out to you for the future, now is the time.
I just say thank you. Thank you. That was fun. Yeah, appreciate y'all. And let's
Thank you,
let's
Sharon.
charge forward together, no doubt.
Thank you all.
No thoughts. He's just said, thank you. It was awesome being here. I appreciate everyone showing up, and I enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm waiting on signals from our tech people to let me know.
I'm going to sign off.